Right now, it's time for this.
5 Live. Gordon Smart.
It is the perfect song for a special guest on the show tonight. Welcome to Weeknights and 5 Live as Monday rolls into Tuesday, and our brand new little show starts a brand new feature with a guest you're going to get to know a lot better in the weeks to come. He is our very own Dr. Beat, Dr. Joe Bennett, forensic musicologist at Berklee College of Music in Boston. He will be here between 12 and 1 every Monday into Tuesday, where he's going to give us a real insight into the essence of pop music, how it works, why it moves us, and what the formula is to a great record, if there is such a thing. Good evening, good morning. Where are you, Joe, in the world right now? What time is it?
So I'm in Boston, USA right now, so it's 5 hours ago. Right. So last night I had to remember to text all my family and friends in the UK at 7 p.m. because it was midnight for them. So this is a comfortable evening for me, late night for you.
It's the space-time continuum. We'll try and tap dance around it best we can. I've got a question straight off the bat for you, Joe, right? What is the perfect song for New Year? As the bells strike, what song would you play to bring in the new year?
Oh, my goodness. Well, obviously, it's hard to hate Auld Lang Syne. It's a classic. It's a great melody.
I don't know. I think I could argue with you on that, Joe.
Well, I'm not going to argue with the Scot over that one, right? Let's go to get the blows over Burns. But no, I'm actually very fond of the ABBA Happy New Year, which I just think is just a fantastic tune, great chords, and I'm a secret ABBA fan. Oh, not so secret now, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go for the Pogues and Fiesta. It feels like a celebration. It's got an upbeat tune, isn't it? Or what else would I have? It's a good... I'm going to stumble here. I think, how about Bob Dylan and Wigwam? I don't know if you've heard that. That's a little bit more of a downbeat, sort of sad start to the year.
Well, yeah, I think... New Year is about new beginnings and optimism, I think. So I think we need something a little upbeat.
Yeah, good shout. I think I'm going to stick with the Pogues. Welcome to the show anyway, Joe. This is the start. One of my favourite interviews last year. I got to spend an hour with you and you blew my mind. So I'm so pleased that you're going to be with us regularly. Looking forward to this as a regular slot. And the first thing we've got to talk about is walk-on tracks. You know, you're a professor of musicology. Nobody better to explain the science behind what works as a ring walk track. So Dr. Beat was the song that we chose for you. Are you happy with that? Do you think it's appropriate?
Well, at the time when I finished my musicology PhD, I can't say I had that track in my mind as a life goal. But it's hard to hate the Miami Sound Machine. I mean, my goodness, what a body of work! What an amazing set of records. So yeah, well, loving Dr. Beat, and so yeah, it's a good shout. But yeah, walk on music. I don't think most musicologists have walk on music, so you might be innovating just right there, just by the fact of doing it.
Well, we're welcome to suggestions. 85058 if you'd like to suggest the perfect track for Professor Joe Bennett to be our resident musicologist. But maybe we can do better. I don't know. We'll see if anybody has any good suggestions. And looking into this area a little bit before the show, walk-on tracks mean different things in different sports, I think, because we've got the Darts World Championship on at home. And at the moment, we can have a look at some of those songs in just a second. But a lot of those seem to be something to do with the nickname of the player or the name of the player, or maybe just an invitation to what's a really raucous crowd to get people up out of their seats and dancing. What do you reckon? It's a kind of combination of the both, Joe, isn't it?
Well, all music, all pop music has a function in society. It's there for a reason. You know, you go to a club, you want to hear music of a certain tempo because you want to dance. So you go to a sporting event, you want that intro music to get you in the zone of your favorite sports person. So yeah, intro music has a very specific function to be played in very specific venues for very specific reasons. And I suggest that is part of its sound. The reason it sounds like that is because it has to achieve those things of getting the crowd hyped up. And I'm not a sports person, but I imagine getting the person themselves hyped up and ready to do their thing.
I was going to ask, why do you think Sweet Caroline has been such a big success over the last 4 or 5 years?
Oh, it's extraordinary. Well, you know, here in Boston, it's famously the home of the Red Sox baseball team, and they have their stadium, Fenway Park. And it's really caught on specifically for the Red Sox. It's become their song. As far as I know, there is no Neil Diamond connection to the sports team, but people here just love it. And so, yeah, it's America and the UK. I just think it's probably that it's just an extraordinarily great melody. And of course, it has that famous call and response, which I'm not going to sing live on air right now, but
Shall I do
the
it?
bop.
There we go. That's the best you're going to get from me in karaoke. But it's that call and repeat thing does work, doesn't it? That really helps.
Yeah, I think it sort of invites the crowd to sing along, and it's gone from what was actually on the record just a brass riff, and then it becomes bat bat ba. You have these tens of thousands of people in a sports stadium, all imitating brass instruments in real time. I love it.
Is the secret really that you can be tone deaf and almost get it right? Does that help?
Well, this is something that fascinates me as a music teacher. That I have students that are great singers, but say they play an instrument, they may not be great singers. Not all musicians can sing in tune. And a lot of people don't really sing in tune. If you ask them to sing a well-known song, a lot of people that we know might not sing it super accurately, and that's fine, it takes all sorts. But what amazes me is when you hear a stadium crowd singing a well-known song, Sweet Caroline, or famously in UK football stadiums, it would be You'll Never Walk Alone. Mm-hmm. Weirdly, en masse, those folks are perfectly in tune.
Yeah.
There's something about the crowd that just lifts everyone to actually sing the melody correctly. Maybe the great singers are drowning out the terrible ones. I don't know what's going on.
Well, if anybody who knows me and is keeping a sweepstake on how long it would be before I mentioned the Proclaimers and Sunshine on Leith, this is the moment, because I don't know if you've heard the choir of football fans singing that beautiful Sunshine on Leith track. That is a really special moment because it's quite difficult to sing as well, Joe.
Well, right. It's who knows what gets a crowd to adopt a particular track. It's a mystery.
So we've given you Dr. Beats, right? And that I think it's going to stick. But if anybody knows any better, 85058 for Professor Joe. We'd love to hear from you. And one of the inspirations for this was boxing and, their own favourites. Like Eye of the Tiger was always a classic. I think Manny Pacquiao came to that. But I think that blurred line between sport and entertainment is where you were commissioned, wasn't it, Joe? Because I think you did a bit of work for the WWE to analyse 5 of the top wrestler walk-on themes. So just why were you asked to do that? It's quite interesting. I'd love to know why.
Yeah, so the WWE just approached me and said, we want to get some not exactly academic work, but we want to get somebody talking about these great musical themes that these stars of WWE wrestling have. Steve Austin, Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, and they asked me to write this. What was effectively just a blog post initially, but I got really into it, as musicologists tend to, went right down the rabbit hole, transcribed all the riffs, looked at their influences, researched the composers. And it's a whole musical world, perhaps a musical language of its own.
Yeah.
WWE walk-on music.
That's a great gig to get, Joe. So let's have a little listen to some music, right? So let's start with Stone Cold Steve Austin's intro and what it's doing. Let's have a little listen. I mean, I think common characteristics, subtlety isn't going to be one of them in wrestling, but what's going on here, Joe? Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, it's a power chord riff, and crucially, it's looping materials with gaps in.
Yeah.
So this is something that all the wrestling themes have in common, that they have looping musical material over and over. Typically 2 bars in length. So I think this track is about 83 beats per minute. So it's so it's a little slower than sort of typical dance music, and pop, which is typically around 120. It's got this sort of pile driver stomping power to it. Partly is a combination of its tempo, and then you have that riff. But the riff itself is quite interesting. It has musical space in it. I'll just grab my guitar here. So it's based on a power chord of E, and so there's a power chord of E, root and fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, root and fifth. And so you put the root and fifth together, you get what guitarists call a power chord, and you can move that chord anywhere on the fingerboard. And you get that very strident, powerful rock sound.
Yeah.
So Stone Cold is based on a simple, initially a 1-bar loop. Da 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 da. Rest, rest, rest. Da 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 da. And of course, it leaves that space in which you imagine that the crowd are going to be pointing their foamy fingers up in the air in the stadium and cheering on their guy as he walks on. But all of the themes that I analyzed have that characteristic. There's a really immediately identifiable, simple musical gesture that loops.
Yeah.
And it's what, was originally leitmotif in opera, or, it's a common technique in movies that you have a particular character that has their music.
It's interesting you mention that, because I thought of Jaws when you were explaining that there. There's a kind of the pause. Similar sort of ominous theme for a wrestler.
Right, well, you were hearing, that's a semitone. There's a cello playing the semitone.
I'm scared already, Joe.
But that's a particularly heavy metal gesture, that flat to that minor second interval, E5, F5. And then in the second part of the Stone Cold theme, you have this, what I call the tension theme, which is a lick straight out of Black Sabbath, Jimi Hendrix, Metallica. The B section goes, it's like, it's super ominous.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to the rest. So it's something that just is going to work great in a stadium. It's not too rhythmically complex. Mm-hmm. And this is the other thing about walk-on music for large sports events. It has to be able to tolerate a long reverb. Because obviously, if you go into a sports stadium, that's a big space. Any sound is going to bounce around the walls and bounce around the floors and the ceiling and everything. So you can't have like rhythmically intricate stuff going on. You can't have fast tempos. You can't really have many lyrics because that's just going to echo and bounce around. Yeah. So you need this music that is that has space in it and is very simple and can be understood literally at a distance.
Yeah. Joe, you mentioned a few others there: Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks. And presumably, the music has to match the personality of the wrestler, right? So if any of those ones that I could play that you could analyse, which would you suggest?
Oh, goodness me. Well, let's have a look at Head of the Table is the piece of music, which is Roman Reigns' walk-on music.
I'll give you a little blast of that. Here we go. Roman Reigns. Here we go. Head of the Table. Is that going to play? Can't hear it. Can we fade that up? So there we go. Head of the Table, Roman Reigns. Explain that one to us, Professor Joe.
Well, it has to fit the character, and of course, because what do they call it? WWE sports entertainment.
Yeah.
Debatable if it's sports at all, but obviously people love it. So it's sports entertainment. So that means the characters, let's call them that, the performers each have their own identifiable characters. And the quotes bad guys in WWE, I knew nothing about this world till I started researching it, but they call the bad guys the heels. So if you're like if you're in that character, you're described as a heel. And Roman Reigns has been very commonly a heel, and his shtick it's kind of gothic, it's kind of medieval. So they have these big choirs and this big sort of Aeolian minor key theme. But again, the choral music is not complicated. It's just big, long notes that are going to come across in that stadium environment. All these big minor thirds, but still with the almost new metal drums that we have of those tom-toms. So it's got some of that, of the power from the rock thing, but it's sort of quasi-classical music, sort of Wagnerian without the key changes.
Mm-hmm. Well, so when you presented this back to WWE, what was the main finding you had from your study, your delve into this?
Well, that they had to have certain characteristics. So we talked about space, we talked about looping. Because the characters in WWE are about being powerful, beating the other person. There's normally some indicator of power throughout the track, power chords, these big choral numbers, which suggests a kind of operatic Wagnerian level of scale. And most of them have big drums and, as I say, no lyric, because you don't want to be thinking about words when you're chanting for your favorite performer. So what we heard there was what you might call quasi-classical, quasi-romantic music. But the most common styles that we heard are, unsurprisingly, the most popular music, one might say, of the last several decades, hip-hop and rock. And what interested me as someone, because I used to work for a guitar magazine in the 90s, so I did a whole lot of riff analyzing at that time. So just at that time, late 90s, it was just beginning the rise of new metal. You know, bands like Limp Bizkit were coming along, and Linkin Park and so on. And this was sort of heavy, almost hip-hop production techniques, but applied to rock riffs. So when I hear a lot of WWE, I hear the sound of, early new metal 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's hard to hate. It does what it's required to do.
It does. It really does deliver, doesn't it? And actually bringing it closer to home, the Darts World Championship walkout themes, they are distinctly more mainstream rock and pop, I think. And they really do get people wound up and worked up. So I thought I'd play a few of these to you tonight. I thought I'd start with Gerwin Price. And like we were saying, there's always a connection to the name, right? So there might be a little trick in the name. But Gerwin Price has got a belter of a walk-on track. Here it is. So Gerwin Price, Ice Ice Baby.
Let's kick it.
So what do you reckon to that? I mean, it's a little bit more sedate than you would expect for the Darts, but it's such a well-loved track. And again, people can get involved in it, can't they?
Well, right. And it's another 2-bar loop. Dung, 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 digga, dung, dung. Dung, 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 digga, dung, dung. And obviously, as I'm sure most listeners would know, Vanilla Ice famously sampled Queen's Under Pressure. And at the time, amusingly tried to deny it. That's a whole other story. But it's instantly recognizable. You've got that drum machine and the picked bass riff. Ding, 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 digga, ding, ding, with this very fizzy sort of 808 style hi-hat and the shaker there. But it does have the characteristic that all walk-on music needs, which is it has to be instantly recognizable. Yeah. You have to associate it with your favorite sports person, your favorite character. And really, with Ice Ice Baby, it's such a well-known record that I would say most people get it when they hear the little at the top.
Yeah.
The downbeat of the bass riff. And actually there's quite a lot of academic research supporting that it is possible for us to recognize records that we love in literally a fraction of a second, about 200 milliseconds, the research suggests.
Really, that's interesting. Well, it's funny you mention that, because the next one I think it's been used in football. It kind of crossed all sorts of genres, right? But this one is Michael van Gerwen's walk-on track, and it's the White Stripes. Seven Nation Army, the White Stripes. Professor Joe, why on earth has that caught us all? So it's just grabbed everyone, hasn't it?
I think there will be fists raised in the studio and the horns of rock there. It's another 2-bar riff. So it's here it is again on guitar. It's in E minor, and so if there's your pulse, 123 beats per minute, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can hear the 4 on the floor kick drum there, giving us the beat that comes in after the guitar riff, but the main riff. And when we first hear that, it's an octave lower than when I played it there, because it played on the electric bass. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2 bars of music looping around. And so instantly recognizable. It has a sonic signature of that twangy bass. And because famously the White Stripes music was so sort of garage minimalist at the time, garage rock minimalist. That record, the first thing we hear is just bass and kick drum.
Yeah.
And it's immediately sort of this evocative stripped down sound. It's also not too busy. You know, there's no shakers or sort of complicated rhythms. So it works great in a stadium, just that powerful bum, 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 bum. And incidentally, 123 BPM is a pretty good tempo for stomping onto a darts platform, shall we say.
And also,
I don't know if any darts players move that fast, but maybe.
It's interesting as well how you'll be able to help me with the vocabulary here, but the syllables tend to match the music quite nicely as well. So there's a classic Michael Van Gerwen or Jeremy Corbyn as well. That's quite helpful, isn't it? I mean, what's the science behind that? Why does that click?
Well, it's an easy melody to remember. And of course, if in the off chance that you didn't get it the first time, it repeats throughout, and it's 6 syllables. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 7, isn't it? Yeah. 7 syllables. Oh, Jeremy Corbyn. If you count that first repeating note, though, of course, in the what we might call the cover version of Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, it misses out that repeated E note at the start, making it 6. So it's easy for people to remember. It goes up. It's in E and E. I can't really sing an E because it's right at the top of my tenor range. But if I were in like a loud environment, then that would be, for most guys, and I don't know the demographic of darts fans, I'm sure there's men and women that love it, but I'm going to take a stab that it probably skews towards guys. So E is kind of high up in the vocal range. So if you are singing along to it, the E and the G above, it's going to make most fellas sing pretty
Right. And that helps. It's interesting you mention that, actually, because this is a message from a former student of yours we've had tonight, from Bath Spa University. Firstly, great to hear Joe on the show. Secondly, currently driving home from Anfield, and I can confirm the crowd definitely cannot sing You'll Never Walk Alone in tune or indeed in time. And that's from Joe, I think I'm going to say this right, Shavin? Joe Shavin?
Oh, Joe. Yeah, great to hear from you, Joe. Fantastic. Well, yes, he was a great student and he learned the kind of musical pedantry that I want all my students to learn. So he was an immediate critic of that crowd. Though I maintain that when you hear an Anfield crowd en masse, the overall impression is that they're in tune.
I always love that moment when you're at the football or the rugby and somebody really delivers the line perfectly with conviction in the correct tone at the right register. And you can see people turn around and go, that's who we're going to follow here and get it right. I've got another one for you. This is Damon Heta, right? And he's got a bit of Kings of Leon as his walk-on track. Have a listen to this one, Joe. Sex is on Fire by Kings of Leon. I remember interviewing Caleb Folwell about that, and he always explained to young children listening that it was actually about your socks being on fire. So if anybody's up past their bedtime at Christmas time, New Year, that's what that's about. It's about socks being on fire. Again, it got to the chorus a little bit later than I remember, but it is a great chorus to get to. What's the secret behind that one, Joe?
Well, that one's quite a lot faster than most walk-on music. It's certainly way faster than the WWE themes we looked at. It's 150-something BPM, Sex on Fire. And unusually, it's an 8-bar loop. So you've got this sort of offbeat guitar. So 2, 3, 4, and then down to the C-sharp minor. So you've got that again, an instant sonic signature to that record. It's almost like a ska, or very fast reggae. No, more like a ska rhythm guitar part, but applied to a really in-your-face 150 plus pounding rock song. And again, it's right up there in the upper part of most guys' vocal range, which enables you to get that really sort of yelling way up at G sharp, whoa, which I can't do in that octave in the chorus. So it's a belter of a track, but unusually fast at a tempo that high, and an unusually long loop. And I suggest the reason that works well in the walk-on environment is because that offbeat guitar riff is so readily identifiable. It's like immediately, even though you're not hearing the chorus necessarily, as you said there, you immediately know the sonic signature of that track.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a real reach, can't it, for the punters singing that one? You know that it's quite a high note, isn't it? So do you just drop it an octave if you're giving some advice to folk off to the darts if they're listening for some music advice, Joe?
I was going to say yes. It doesn't sound quite as sort of angsty and rocky when you sing "Oh, your sex is on fire," but certainly that's a more comfortable octave for me. That is definitely what I would advise.
Right. Here's another one for you, Joe. Right. This is Nathan Aspinall, and he has a bit of the Killers and Mr. Brightside.
Coming out of my cage and I've been doing just fine. Gotta be down because I want it all. It started out with a kiss, how did it end up like this? It was only a kiss, it was only a kiss. Now I'm falling asleep and she's calling a cab while he's having a smoke and she's taking a drag. Now they're going to bed and my stomach is sick and it's all in my head, but she's touching his chest. Now he takes off her dress. Now let me go. I just can't look, it's killing me and taking control. Jealousy turning saints into the sea, swimming through sick lullabies, choking on your alibis. But it's just the price I pay. Destiny is calling me. Open up my eager eyes, 'cause I'm Mr. Brightside.
Mr. Brightside and the Killers. And Joe, I mean, it is an epic, isn't it? There's some crescendo in there.
Yeah, well, it's what a colleague of mine used to call the wedge of cheese. You keep adding more and more dynamics until you get to the chorus, but Mr. Brightside, it's a great rock track, and it's got that sort of big 8-to-the-bar guitar. So it's a real sort of pounding and quite fast. It's 148 BPM, and but it actually shares quite a lot of DNA with contemporary pop, because like most contemporary pop in the Billboard Hot 100, for example, it's a 4-chord loop. And I suspect in this slot, it's going to be something that we come across quite a lot as we're analysing popular music, because so much pop and rock is based on 4-chord loops, as particularly any of the guitarist listeners are going to know. So that loop for the chorus of Mr. Brightside is a 1-4-6-5 loop. So it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. And double timing that. Whoops. And so when you have that loop, again, it gives you a sort of an immediate structure, and it gives the listeners something to hang on to. And there is just something about 4-chord loops that we just love as listeners. Yeah. And that's why so many songwriters use them as the basic starting point. And I maintain only the starting point for building a fantastic song. The 4-chord loop can be very familiar to listeners and very intoxicating.
Can you present another couple to us just to give us a sense of what you mean?
Oh, 4-chord loop songs. There are so many.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorites is U2's With or Without You. And just goes round and round for the whole track. It's a four chord loop with all the dynamics, and so on. But in fact, what I always loved about the way they played that loop is it's also the theme from the Magic Roundabout.
And that's why you're here, Joe. That's what we're talking about earworms for. I love it when you do this stuff. Again, those little examples. I'm sure that sounds a little bit like the Magic Roundabout.
Well, there's something about short fragments of melody that our human ears are evolved to recognize patterns in sound. It's probably I'll be interested to get the take of an evolutionary biologist on why that would be. But as a musicologist, it's such an obvious fact in repertoire over 100 years or more that we just find these things very, very appealing in music, and we recognize similarity and allusion where we hear it.
And before the end of the show, we'll get into Joe being an expert witness in some plagiarism trials, because it's a really interesting way to decode and understand music, and whether or not some songs have borrowed from others, if we're going to put it in slightly safer legal speak. But we'll get to that in just a second, because we've now covered a bit of WWE, we've talked about the party vibe of darts, but the world of the boxing ring walk is a belter. It's a great party we play around this time of year, actually. If you've got to choose your music and walk into it and pretend you're a heavyweight fighter, it's good fun if you want to try that at home. So I'm going to play the classic for you just to get you the sense of this. This is the ultimate boxing walk on track. So there we are, Survivor, Eye of the Tiger. That was used by Manny Pacquiao, amongst others. And it's so associated, isn't it, with being used in the sort of context that it kind of borders on pastiche. But what's the secret behind it? Why is it such a brilliant tune for boxers, Joe?
Well, first of all, it was, of course, written for a boxing movie, Rocky III. So I think anyone who's seen that movie, and it was very well loved. And of course, it was directed by Sylvester Stallone himself. In fact, the story goes that he actually asked Survivor to write that song because Queen denied him permission to use Another One Bites the Dust. So the story goes. I don't know if that's true, but I believe it to be.
What a great story. Love that.
Oh, yeah. So it's basically it's tension and release, like a lot of the WWE themes we looked at. It has power chords in it, but you've got this this sort of muted 16 to the bar. So there's your 2, 3, 4. It's da 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 da, and then the riff. So 4-bar loop in that case, and then of course you get the 4 on the floor kick drum comes in, that sort of stomping power, and then a lot of the production tropes that we heard earlier with the WWE examples, notably distortion guitar, which of course denotes power, especially when played with moving power chords, as we heard there.
It's interesting how it matches up so beautifully. That as a composer, it's quite an interesting brief to get, isn't it? And we touched on it earlier, didn't we, with Jaws and John Williams? You can imagine the conversation between director and composer to say, this is the sense we get. But Sylvester, I didn't know that about Sylvester Stallone. Can you think of any other good examples of that, where the theme tune matches perfectly to what we're looking for? Because I'd imagine in the weeks and months ahead, we'll be looking into some of these issues too.
Well, right. I mean, that is very much the gig for a media composer. In fact, from my own friends who are media composers and people around the Berklee College community, we have a whole film scoring degree there. A lot of those folks say that they don't want directors to talk to them about music. They don't want a musical brief. They want an emotional brief. They want the director to say, so this guy's really sad and conflicted, but when he goes out in the ring, he's an animal, or whatever the character's arc is, because composers much prefer, in my experience, to deal with the technical aspects themselves. They're the experts in music and creating music. When they look for a brief from a director, they want the emotional arc and the character's story as the background. And of course, when you get that right, as in the case of Eye of the Tiger, it becomes instantly sort of a calling card for that character.
Yeah, let's have one more. Let's have a little listen to Terence Crawford, who's an incredible boxer, and he's got a bit of Eminem as his walk-in track. Have a little listen to this one.
Look, if you had one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, did you capture it? Just let it slip. Yo. His palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater.
Eminem, Lose Yourself. And I think the lyrics speak brilliantly, but musically, there is a great bit of suspense being built up there, isn't there, Joe?
Well, right, it's our old friend, the power chord. So you got root and fifth, so in the key of D. Here's a D, here's an A, the fifth above, and you've got that. So you've got the fifth rising to a minor sixth, and because there's a thing called a palm mute, if I play those chords regular, it doesn't sound as menacing. But when I put the palm mute in there on the guitar, which actually cuts each note short, it's a lot more menacing. And, to me, that has like shades of Led Zeppelin's Kashmir about it. And that's what I always hear when I hear that riff. But that was an interesting bit of music, actually, because that song was actually the subject of a lawsuit. I know we're going to talk about lawsuits in a little while, but the New Zealand National Party in the 2014 general election in that country had a sound-alike of Lose Yourself as their like backing music for We're the Party and Vote for Us for their TV campaign. And they used a sound-alike track that was not the Eminem track, but sounded very, very similar, and found themselves in a courtroom and actually lost the case, perhaps foolishly, because the production company that made the sound-alike track called it Eminem-esque.
Kind of gives it away a bit, Joe.
Talk about confessing.
Yeah, I thought that court case didn't last too long, but we will get on to that because I find it fascinating about what you do in particular as an expert witness in court cases on plagiarism. We will come to that in a second. So I think we've taken into account all of it, a bit of WWE, a bit of boxing, some darts as well. So I think the walk-on theme, Dr. Beats, feels good for me. But if you've got a better suggestion for Professor Joe Bennett, please do get in touch, 85058. Or indeed, if you'd like to suggest your own walk-on music, we would love to hear that as well, 85058. Right, Joe, before we get to that main specialism of copyright we were talking about, we should definitely mention a little side hustle, a sideline you had in the audio rounds. I mean, you are perfectly equipped for pub quizzes, right? Putting together a bit of music. So take us back. Presumably this was to fund your academic studies.
Oh, no, it was an unpaid voluntary gig, which I was glad to do. So the story is that my brother lived in the West End of London, and he ran his local pub quiz. And he's like a super knowledgeable guy and was great at researching at all the rounds and everything. He was the quiz master, but he wanted me to put together the music round. So for years and years, I just used to make his music round, burn them onto a CD, and he'd play them in the pub and, see.
And take credit.
I think I got the occasional credit, but I got really into it, making little quizzes, because I'm fascinated by this psychology that, people's recognition for popular music can be very sophisticated with songs that we know well. So each round that I prepared for those projects was actually about finding songs that people know really, really well and then disguising them in some way.
Right, gotcha. So give us a sense of those music rounds then, Joe. What were you putting together?
Well, it started out pretty simple, like here are 5 drum intros from great songs that have drum intros, or 5 guitar riffs, that sort of thing. And then, as we got deeper into it and the pub crowd started really enjoying them, we got a bit more esoteric. So I think my personal favorite one was, here are 10 classic rock tracks, but just the chords and played on a ukulele.
Right.
It was like identifying like epic rock tracks with this tinny little ukulele sound from
brilliant.
just the chord sequence. That was a lot of fun, that one. Maybe we'll play that one in a future week.
Well, Joe, this is the moment where I tell our listeners, our late night listeners, to get a pen and paper ready, because we're going to have a little music quiz here. I think we're going to ask you for 5 tracks, hopefully, if you can do this for us, Joe. And we've got to try and work out what the tracks are. Explain the rounds to us. I've got my notes down here ready to go, and I'm terrified I'm going to make a fool of myself here. But hey ho, it's the first night. Let's see how we do.
Okay, well, you're going to hear 5 extremely well-known pieces of music. And to mix it up with the ages, because I don't think any generation should have a particular advantage in these quizzes, I choose music from right across the decades, 60s through present day, basically, in popular hits. So hopefully hits during everyone's lifetime. And you're going to hear them, well, pressure of time, you're probably only going to hear each one once. Okay. And I'm going to play around about 12, 14 seconds of each. And you've got to simply identify the track. The only catch is every excerpt is played backwards.
Right, got you. So 85058, get your pen and paper ready. You're going to hear 5 backward tracks. We will play them for you. You've got to be listening very carefully, because Joe is a stickler here. He's been through this plenty of times. There will be no debate and no question of his authority here. 85058, and I'll do the roll of honour before I hand over to Doughton at 1 o'clock. Right, so do you want to take this away then, Joe?
Here we go. Here is question number 1. What is this famous track from 1967?
I just think I got that at the very end. At the very end.
Put that little brass riff in there, because if anyone can sing that brass riff backwards, they'll have it.
God, that helped me massively, because I was worried. And if anybody's just tuned in, don't worry, this is no satanic backwards ritual that we're playing here, now that I've got control of the radio waves for the evening. Right, so number 1's done. Right, Joe, what have you got for us up next?
Okay, here's number 2. This is a sort of funky track from 1970.
I think that's, yeah. I think we might have. I think I've got that one. That was good, Joe. That was good. Right, give us the next one, Joe.
Okay, so this is we're coming a little bit more recent. This is from 1978, slightly longer excerpt. So again, you want to sing the riffs backwards to yourself. There's a lot of repetition in that one. Again, hopefully might give people a bit of a clue.
I've got a decent guess.
So moving right along to number 4. This is from 2005. So this is a little bit more recent, still nearly 20 years old, but a great track. See if people can identify it.
Oof, it's good. It's good. Right, give us the last one, Joe.
And here's the last one. This is from 2014. Very well-known song. Big hit.
That's fantastic. Right, we had 5 tracks there from Professor Joe. 85058 if you'd like to have a stab at it. You win honour. That's what you win this evening. You win Joe's respect, and you win the honour of being a 5 Live superstar. So get in touch, 85058 if you had any luck with those guesses. Thank you so much for that, Joe. I really enjoyed that. Brilliant stuff. You will be getting tapped up by me at some point soon, next time I'm asked to contribute to a pub quiz. So we were hinting there, Joe, that you've got a specialism in the world of legal challenges over copyright infringement in particular. So basically, when an artist thinks somebody's copied their song, you are the expert witness that will be up to explain and decode some of the stuff that's happening. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's really what a forensic musicologist does. We're called on to assist usually parties who are in conflict with each other, where one party is saying this later song copied in some way from my earlier song, and usually the person who allegedly did the copying is denying it, and so you have a disagreement. Lawyers become involved, especially in America where I live, very litigious country. I consider myself an ethical musicologist. I just tell my clients the truth to try and get to the facts of, is song B partly copied from song A? And that's really the single question that forensic musicologists are called in. And essentially there are two kinds of cases. There's musical copying, for example, a melody or a lyric or a bass line or something. And then there is audio copying, which we popularly know as sampling. Did you actually take some of the record and incorporate it into the later record? And I have different techniques for detecting each alleged type of plagiarism.
It's really interesting, Joe. I've written about this a lot as a journalist, and I've talked about it a lot on the radio, but it always strikes me that it must be quite difficult, or maybe not, maybe it is easy to prove a claim of copyright infringement. So what are the elements that tend to be used in these claims then? Are we talking lyrics, rhythm, chord progression, bass lines? What are the key things that you look for?
Well, you look for uniqueness in the earlier work. There are, without getting too legally technical about it, there are basically two copyrights in music. There's the musical work that we think of as the song, which is typically the top line, the melody, the lyrics, the chord progression, arguably, and any other notable, unique elements. A bass line's a good example. So what... If you copy some element of that is actually unique to that earlier song, then there's a possibility that it's copyright infringement. As a musicologist, I don't call copyright infringement, I call plagiarism. It's only a court that can decide whether a copyright has actually been infringed. But to be clear about it, it's not just about similarity. There are lots of reasons that one song can sound a little bit similar to another, and it's not necessarily evidence of copying. So a lot of people who call me and ask for musicology services saying, Justin Bieber copied my melody or whatever, some of those folks are disappointed because sometimes the answer is no, it's just a coincidence.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, how often is this about cold hard cash as well, Joe? Is it often about getting a credit on a song?
Well, it can be, yeah. I mean, there's so many examples of that happening. I suppose Sam Smith's "Stay With Me" is a fairly recent one, where the parties agreed that he probably had inadvertently copied from Tom Petty's "I Won't Back Down," and Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne got a credit on Sam Smith's "Stay With Me" because those melodies were, to be fair, very, very similar. Mm-hmm. But yeah, of course, it's about money, and it's not about anything else, actually. No one ever went to prison for copyright infringement. It's about economic damages. So it's sort of dealt with in the civil courts here in the US. And most of the lawsuits take place in the USA because obviously that's where the headquarters are a lot of the big music publishers and media companies are, and specifically in California, what the judicial system calls the Ninth Circuit over here in the States.
Joe, having this academic qualification, and I'm going to call it a gift, right, because I really admire your musical ear, but has it kind of killed music a bit for you? Do you just always hear music and think, that sounds familiar, or maybe that's like this? Is it taking the fun out of it a bit?
Not for me, just subjectively. I love pop music more than when I got my first album in 1977, which was actually ABBA's Arrival. So that perhaps it explains my love of ABBA. No, I find as much joy in listening to popular music as I ever did. And just because I did lots of musical training and studied musicology, all that means is, I listen more deeply than I did before I did that training. So I just find lots to enjoy in a track. I suppose it is a bit nerdy to, listen to a track and say, wow, that's a great hi-hat part, and completely ignore the lyric. But sometimes that's how it can get. So forensic listening, I find it enormous fun. And for me, it reveals interesting layers that get me deeper into the music.
And I think we will have time in the weeks to come to really get into this and show a good example. But I wonder if there's just a very quick overview of how that would look. I think there's an example you've shared with me in the past. I wondered if you'd just share it now with George Harrison.
Oh yeah. So the story was that the George Harrison had his famous hit in 1970, My Sweet Lord, which was a massive hit. It was off his All Things Must Pass album, his first big album after the Beatles broke up. And a lot of people started saying that at the time in 1970 when it came out, that sounds a little bit like the Chiffons' He's So Fine, which was from the early 60s, written by a songwriter called Ronnie Mack. So, yeah, not to explain too much of the context of the case, because it dragged on through the courts for literally decades. But spoiler, George Harrison was found originally in 1976 to have plagiarized from He's So Fine. So I've got the tracks queued up here. Here's My Sweet Lord, and the relevant excerpt of it. You'll hear a bit of the verse and chorus.
My sweet Lord, my Lord, my Lord, I really want to see you, really want to be with you, really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long.
And it was alleged that Harrison had copied from the earlier hit, the Chiffons' He's So Fine. Now, it's at a different tempo and it's in a different key, so it's faster and in a higher key, but here it is.
He's so fine. Wish you were mine. That handsome boy over there. One with the wavy hair. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna make it mine. Be the envy of all the girls. It's just a matter of...
You can hear it, Joe.
Yeah, so you can kind of hear it, and I imagine the musicians who are listening in and driving home from a gig will be hearing those similarities of chord changes as well as the sort of surface level melodic stuff. But of course, what they couldn't do in 1976, when this mainly hit the courtroom, is that they couldn't digitally manipulate the audio, as I have done here. So My Sweet Lord is originally in E major and 122 beats per minute. If I keep it in E major and speed it up to 141 beats per minute, that's the tempo of He's So Fine. Here's George Harrison much faster.
My sweet Lord, my Lord, my Lord.
So on. Here's He's So Fine at the same speed, but pitched down so it's in the same key as My Sweet Lord.
He's so fine. Wish you were mine. That handsome boy over there. One with the wavy hair. I don't know how.
So when they are played in the same key, and if we flip backwards and forwards between them,
My sweet Lord,
He's so fine.
then those similarities become much more apparent when we compensate for tempo and key. And now, as a final bit of mischief, Gordon, I can see you wearing your stereo headphones today, as am I. So it is possible to tempo sync them and play one in the left channel and one in the right channel, and it sounds like this.
There we go. And it was costly.
It really was. The judge's famous quote at the end was, "Did Harrison deliberately use the music of He's So Fine? I don't think he did it deliberately. Nevertheless, it is clear that My Sweet Lord is the very same song as He's So Fine with different words. This is, under the law, infringement of copyright, and no less so, even though subconsciously accomplished."
It's fantastic. And if you'd like to get in touch with a couple of earworms or maybe songs you think sound the same, 85058, we will put them to our Dr. Beat and we will see if there's a love and theft relationship without that leading to court with a little bit of luck. Joe, you played a little bit of a pub quiz to us earlier on, and by the way, thank you so much for that. I find that fascinating when you decode music like that, so really appreciate it. But your pub quiz music, we heard 5 tracks from you backwards. Have we got time, do you think, Paul Bond behind the glass? Only to give the answers. We can't play them, I'm afraid. So number 1, was that Daydream Believer?
Good spot. Here it is.
cheer up, sleepy Jean.
Right, number 2, was it Edwin Starr?
You're on fire, Gordon. Here it is.
And we've got time for, I think, one more Bee Gees, was it? Number 3?
Well, you're right, Zone. It was Frankie Valli. It was the song. It was the music from Greece.
Got that wrong. Shout out to John, Christopher, Michael and Steve, who all got it right. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Well done. The other 2 were Kanye West, Gold Digger, I think, and maybe Pharrell, Happy Williams. Joe, thank you so
Very
much.
good.
Professor Joe Bennett, absolutely brilliant having a musicologist on. We will have him again next week. Please send in your earworms for us to decipher and sort out. 85058 if you want to do that. Thank you for joining me tonight. Up next, the one and only Daughter. See you tomorrow.
The voice of the UK. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.